steward, I'm not your dude.
Welcome to the show, and once more we are going to dive into the very interesting and thought-provoking work called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon by the late David McGowan, researcher, and in the eyes of many, including myself, martyr for the cause, for the truther movement. And so if you want more information on just who that is, you should watch Reading 1. This is going to be for the folks who already did that. And thank you again for those of you who came in. I know it's just a few right now, but probably once I get to going, it'll be a lot of folks here. And so I do want to thank the very first people. Though it just really, it sucks how I can't see the very first messages. Because I know I'm missing something. But, okay, so Brother Minister Jason, follower of Christ, said, let's go. Xavier Jones, big nephew, good to see you. Vex 4 says hello. Cody Hicks, Slim Hussein, Roger Sherman, Asia May. Hey there, big niece, and Guacamole Kid, my friend. You've been in my thoughts and prayers. Raul Shaidez and Apathy 314. And just like last time, we're going to jump right into it. And after this presentation, right now there's only one moderator here. But Brother Jason, if you could pass on this information that after this presentation, we're going to log out of this live stream, come back with another one, prayer and praise and worship. So without any further ado, the last time that we read, we ended with chapter number 2, so we will begin now with chapter 3. We now begin with chapter 3, Dig, the Laurel Canyon Death List. Now there's going to be some profanity here and there, but we will classily move over those instances. And I also want to bring up on the screen, I want to just bring something up on the screen so we can kind of have a visual like we had before of different things as we come to them. Okay. Does that sound good? Okay, so again, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, chapter 3. F. He auditioned for Neil for F's sake. Graham Nash, explaining to author Michael Walker how close Charles Manson was to the Laurel Canyon scene. So that's the way Graham Nash explained it, that he auditioned for Neil Young, he being Charles Manson. All right. During the 10-year period during which Lenny Bruce, Raymond Navarro, Sal Mineo, Diane Linkletter, Inger Stevens, Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Wojtek Frykowski, and Abigail Folger all turned up dead, numerous other people connected to Laurel Canyon did as well, often under very questionable circumstances. The list includes, but is certainly not limited to, all of the following names. Marina Elizabeth Habe, whose body was carved up and tossed into the heavy brush along Mulholland Drive, just west of Beaumont Drive, on December 30th, 1968. Habe, just 17 years old at the time of her death, was the daughter of Hans Habe, who immigrated to the U.S. from fascist Austria circa 1940. Shortly thereafter, Hans married a General Foods heiress and began studying psychological warfare at the Military Intelligence Training Center. After completing his training, He put his psychological warfare skills to use by creating 18 newspapers in occupied Germany under the direction, no doubt, of the OSS. Next, Christine Hinton, who was killed in a head-on collision on September 30th, 1969. At the time, Hinton was a girlfriend of David Crosby, and the founder and head of the Byrds fan club. That was the group that Rick James was in. Right? If we were recalling correctly from the Rick James book. And excellent comments on the last videos, you guys. Great comments. She was also the daughter of a career Army officer stationed at the notorious Presidio military base in San Francisco. Notorious partially because of, I'm sure you guys have heard of Michael Aquino, colonel turned general. I do believe at the point of his death he was a general, Michael Aquino, or he had attained the rank of general, and his connection to the trying to find a proper way to say it, and his connection to a ring of what seemed to be trafficking and abuse of little ones. He was connected to it. A lot of people believe that he did it, but somehow or another, this high-ranking military official that was an admitted Satanist, somehow or another, he was found innocent. He got away from that. So this young lady, Christine Hinton, who was a former girlfriend of David Crosby and the founder and head of the Byrds fan club, she was also the daughter of a career Army officer stationed at the notorious Presidio military base in San Francisco. And another of Crosby's girlfriends from that same era was Shelley Roker, who grew up on the Hamilton Air Force Base in Marin County. Marin County, a lot of people know, is that's where they said, or we're told that Tupac, out of the many places that he went, that's supposedly where he grew up and cultivated the West Coast persona or whatever. But what's very interesting here is that he also may have been one of these, but sometimes the children that are provided to these programs like MKUltra and the other programs that we have heard of, but we do have proof of MKUltra, the children that were allegedly involved in these experiments, and a lot of very credible people made those allegations, these children oftentimes would be given to scientists in order for the scientists or the psychologists, psychiatrists, mad scientists to work on those children, to do certain experiments. What the soldier or what the officer would be told is that this is a chance, an opportunity for your child to be elite and exceptional. It was done in Nazi Germany. Hitler did this with the Third Reich. He had programs where, you know, of course, the backstory or the cover story is, oh, we're going to enhance the children. We're going to make them stronger, better, faster, more intelligent Germans. When in reality, they're used as these guinea pigs to try to come up with these technologies that in their eyes create not just a perfect soldier, but because it's a Luciferian agenda from the top down, that create compromised or spiritually compromised, oppressed, or possessed vessels. And not only do military officers and soldiers get duped by this and offer up their children, but sometimes people who get into certain issues with the federal government will do the same thing. Next. Jane Doe number 59 was found dumped into the heavy undergrowth of Laurel Canyon in November 1969, within sight of where Habe, the first girl that we mentioned, had been dumped less than a year earlier. The teenage girl, who was never identified, had been stabbed 157 times, Lord have mercy, in the chest and throat. Next, Alan Blind Owl Wilson, singer, songwriter, and guitarist for the Laurel Canyon blues rock band Canned Heat. I believe I've sampled something from Canned Heat. Let's pull up a picture to enhance what we're talking about real quick. Both of Canned Heat and Alan Blind Owl Wilson. Alan Blind Owl should bring the rest up. Here's Alan Wilson. Nicknamed Blind Owl, American musician best known as the co-founder, leader, co-lead singer, and primary composer of the blues band Canned Heat. And yeah, I have sampled some Canned Heat. Do they have something called an owl song? Is that one of their joints? An American blues rock band that was formed in LA in 1965. Okay, now back to the story. Okay, so Alan Blind Owl Wilson, singer, songwriter, and guitarist for the Laurel Canyon blues rock band Canned Heat, was found dead in his Topanga Canyon home on September 3rd, 1970. His death was written off as a suicide/overdose. Wilson had moved to Topanga Canyon after the band's Laurel Canyon home on Lookout Mountain Avenue, next door to Joni Mitchell and Graham Nash's home, burned to the ground. So Wilson had moved to this new place after the band's Laurel Canyon home burned to the ground. This Wilson is Blind Owl, Alan Wilson. Blind Owl was just 27 years old at the time of his death. A little more than a decade later, Wilson's former bandmate, Bob the Bear Height, who had once acknowledged in an interview that he had partied in the canyons with various members of the Manson family, died of a heart attack at the ripe old age of 36. If you're not under certain protection, the coven has ways of reaching out and touching those that it feels threatened by. Next, we have Jimi Hendrix. Oh, that's where Future got his name from. That's what somebody said. And of course, Jimi Hendrix, legendary guitarist. Anyone who considers himself a serious guitarist is aware of Jimi Hendrix, just like any serious saxophonist is aware of Coltrane. But Jimi Hendrix, who reportedly briefly occupied the sprawling mansion just north of the log cabin. What is the log cabin? That's the White House for the hippies, where Frank Zappa lived. So Jimi Hendrix, who reportedly briefly occupied the sprawling mansion just north of the log cabin after he moved to LA in 1968, died in London under seriously questionable circumstances on September 18th, 1970, though he rarely spoke of it. Jimi had served a stint in the U.S. Army with the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell. His official records indicate that he was forced into the service by the courts and then released after just 1 year when he purportedly proved to be a poor soldier. Say that 3 times fast. One wonders, though, why he was assigned to such an elite division if he was indeed such a failure. Saying that one is a poor soldier is a way to quickly cause for people to dismiss their military service. One also wonders why he wasn't subjected to disciplinary measures rather than being handed a free pass out of his ostensibly court-ordered service. I'm going to have to tell you about my dad's military service. In any event, Jimi himself once told reporters that he was given a medical discharge after breaking an ankle during. One biographer claimed that Jimi faked being gay to earn an early release. The truth, alas, remains rather elusive. At the time of Jimi's death, the first person called by his girlfriend, Monica Danneman, last to see Hendrix alive, happened to be Eric Burdon of the Animals. 2 years later, Burdon had relocated to L.A. and taken over ringmaster duties from Frank Zappa after Zappa had vacated the log cabin and moved into a less high-profile Laurel Canyon home. Eric Burdon and the Animals. On the screen. Interesting. David McGowan spells it with an E. It was actually spelled like the word burden, but here we see it spelled with an O. And it's on the record as an O. So that could just be a oversight. But anyway, or it could be something that he did on purpose, rather tongue-in-cheek. So anyway, 2 years earlier, Burdon had relocated to L.A., took over ringmaster duties from Frank Zappa after Zappa had vacated the log cabin and moved into a less profile Laurel Canyon home. Within a year of Jimi's death, a reported prostitute-turned-groupie named Devon Wilson, who had been with Jimi the day before his death, she plunged from an 8th-floor window of New York's Chelsea Hotel on March 5th, 1973. A shadowy character named Michael Jeffrey, who had managed both Hendrix and Burdon, was killed in a mid-air plane collision. Jeffrey was known to openly boast of having organized crime connections and of working for the CIA. After Jimi's death, it was discovered that Jeffrey had been funneling most of Hendrix's gross earnings into offshore accounts in the Bahamas linked to international drug trafficking. Years later, on April 5th, 1996, Danneman, the daughter of a wealthy German industrialist, was found dead near her home in a fume-filled Mercedes. Jim Morrison, next, who for a time lived in a home on Rothdale Trail. Riders of the Storm. We looked at him before, but there's some young folks listening that are very interested and they're getting an education and may not know his face like we do. I always envisioned Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer really killed that role. But anyway, Jim Morrison, who for a time lived in a home on Rothdale Trail behind the Laurel Canyon Country Store, may or may not have died in Paris on July 3rd, 1971. The events of that day remain shrouded in mystery and rumor, and the details of the story, such as they are, have changed over the years. What is known is that on that very same day, Admiral George Stephen Morrison delivered the keynote speech at a decommissioning ceremony for the aircraft carrier USS Bonhomme Richard, from where 7 years earlier he had helped choreograph the Tonkin Gulf incident. A few years after Jim's death, his common-law wife, Pamela Corson, dropped dead as well, officially of a heroin overdose. So anyone who could possibly know the story. Like Hendrix, Morrison had been an avid student of the occult, with a particular fondness for the work of Aleister Crowley. According to super groupie Pamela Des Barres, he had also read all he could about incest and sadism. Also like Hendrix and Blind Owl Wilson. Also like Hendrix and Wilson, Morrison was just 27 at the time of his possible death, so 3 of the 27 club. And of course, folks on this channel are very well aware of Aleister Crowley, English occultist and counterculture shaper. Many people during this time and era of this music, this hippie music, feel good, peace, love, no war. Crowley books were also flying off the shelf. When there had really been a lull in people's interest of Crowley prior to that. What a coincidence. Yeah, Crowley had his heyday, and then he started to kind of fade away. Only deep and serious occultists knew about him. But it began to be a point of conversation, something that folks at Berkeley could talk about together when you're looking at, when they as young hippies and young people who don't know as much as they think they do, they're looking at everything in the culture as potentially needing to be overhauled, including our whole idea about God and the devil. And so Satanism and satanic movies, Kenneth Anger and others, which I'm sure, which I know Dave is going to get to those. Those things also began to bloom and blossom and gain popularity. A movie like Rosemary's Baby could not have even come out if not for the hippie culture and their new fascination with the occult, led by people such as Morrison and Hendrix and Canned Heat or Blind Owl. Okay, Brandon D. Wild, a good friend of David Crosby and Graham Parsons. And is that of the Parsons Project? Or Jack Parsons on the low, or both behind the closed door? But Brandon D. Wild, a good friend of David Crosby and Graham Parsons, was killed in a freak accident in Colorado on July 6, 1972, when his van plowed under a flatbed truck. In the 1950s, DeWild had been an in-demand child actor since the age of 8. He had appeared on screen with some of the biggest names in Hollywood, including Alan Ladd, Lee Marvin, Paul Newman, John Wayne, Kirk Douglas, Michael's dad, and Henry Fonda. Around 1965, DeWild fell in with Hollywood's quote-unquote Young Turks, through whom he met and befriended David Crosby, Parsons, and various other members of the Laurel Canyon Club. DeWild was just 30 at the time of his death. Christine Fricka. I wonder, is that a misspell? Because it's Frka. But okay. A former governess for Moon Unit Zappa and the Zappa's family's former housekeeper at the log cabin, died on November 5th, 1972, of an alleged drug overdose, though friends suspected foul play, as Miss Christine Fricka had been a member of the Zappa-created GTOs, a musical act of sorts composed entirely of very young groupies. She was also the inspiration for the song Christine's Tune, Devil in Disguise, by Graham Parsons' Flying Burrito Brothers. Fricka may have been in her early 20s when she died. Then we have Danny Whitten, a guitarist, vocalist, songwriter with Neil Young's sometime band Crazy Horse, He died of an overdose on November 18th, 1972. According to rock and roll legend, Witten had been fired by Young earlier that day during rehearsals in San Francisco. Young and Jack Nietzsche, Phil Spector's former top assistant, Spector, Nietzsche, had given Witten $50 and put him on a plane back to L.A. and within hours he was dead. Witten was just 29. Bruce Berry, a roadie for Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, died of a heroin overdose in June 1973. Berry had just flown out to Maui to deliver a shipment of cocaine to Stephen Stills of Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, and was promptly sent back to L.A. by Crosby and Nash. Now, Berry was a brother of Jan Berry of Jan and Dean. Dean Torrance, the dean of Jan and Dean, had played a part in the fake kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr. just a couple weeks after the JFK assassination. And Frank Sinatra Sr. was, of course, married to the star of Rosemary's Baby. These connections, these witches, they tickle me. Okay. So there was a fake kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr. And Dean from Jan and Dean had played a part in that. The staged event, which happened just a couple of weeks after the JFK assassination. The staged event was a particularly transparent effort to divert attention away from questions that were cropping up after the initial shock had passed about the events in Dealey Plaza. Next would be Clarence White, and there's so much we could say about the assassination and those involved and how they ended up with the Bush administration. George Bush himself appeared to be a little tickled when talking about the assassination. Folks say he may have been there, but that's a whole other story for another time. But just to show you how deep the witches go. Clarence White, a guitarist who had played with the Byrds, sound like a brother too, was run over by a drunk driver and killed on July 14th, 1973. White had grown up near Lancaster, not far from where Frank Zappa spent his teen years. At least one member of White's immediate family was employed at Edwards Air Force Base. The driver, who killed young Clarence, just 29 years old at the time of his death, was given a 1-year suspended sentence and served no time. And now we come to Graham Parsons. And I am curious because I said that because I thought I remembered Clarence White's name from the Rick James book, but I may be wrong. Clarence White. Let's pull him up real quick and see what we can see. American guitarist. Okay. Okay, this is Clarence White. Okay. Okay. An American bluegrass and country guitarist and singer, died age 29. He is best known as a member of the bluegrass ensemble, the Kentucky Colonels, and the rock band, the Byrds, as well as for being a pioneer of the musical genre of country rock during the late 1960s. Okay, now and on to Parsons. American singer-songwriter. Ingram Cecil Connor III, known professionally as Graham Parsons, was an American singer-songwriter, guitarist, and pianist. Okay. He recorded as a solo artist and with the International Submarine Band, the Byrds, and the Flying Burrito Brothers. Okay, nothing to do with the Parsons Project. Okay. Now, let's get to Graham. It says, Graham Parsons, formerly with the International Submarine Band, the Byrds, and the Flying Burrito Brothers, allegedly overdosed on a speedball at the Joshua Tree Inn on September 19th, 1973. And I'm looking at the dates. and seeing things too. It's not always by gematria, and gematria is a tricky thing to try to find clues from because there's so many different forms of it that you can kind of make it a catch-all. And that's what a lot of people end up doing. But more often what these witches or warlocks will do things based on astrological forecasts. For instance, a lot of times on the cusp, like in this case with Graham Parsons, or based on the configuration of the numbers, like if it's 6/6 or June 6th, or examples like that. So it's usually something that you can spot without doing gematria calculator math. Usually. Not to say that they never use it, but they don't use it as often as I think some people think, because it's mind-blowing when you discover that they use it at all. But they usually use the simple form of it when they do. So, Graham Parsons allegedly overdosed on a speedball on September 19th, 1973. Just 2 months before his death, Parsons' Topanga Canyon home had burnt to the ground. After his death, his body was stolen from LAX by the Burritos road manager, Phil Kaufman, and then taken back out to Joshua Tree and ritually burned on the autumnal equinox. Big Unc know what he talking about. Kaufman had been a prison buddy of Charlie Manson's at Terminal Island. When Phil was released from Terminal Island in March of 1968, he quickly reunited with his old pal, who had been released a year earlier. So by the time of Graham's death, his family had already experienced its share of questionable deaths. Just before Christmas 1958, Graham Parsons' father had sent Graham, along with his mother and sister, off to stay with family in Florida. The next day, just after the winter solstice, Ingram Cecil Connor Jr. caught a bullet to the head. His death was recorded as a suicide, and it was claimed that he had sent his family away to spare them as much pain as possible. It seems just as likely, however, that Cecil knew his days were numbered and wanted to get his family out of the line of fire. The next year, 1959, Graham's mother married again to Robert Ellis Parsons, who adopted Graham and his sister Avis. So both of them was in there? Oh, okay, anyway, okay. Got it. Okay, 6 years later, in June of 1965, Graham's mother died the day after a sudden illness landed her in the hospital. According to witnesses, she died, quote-unquote, almost immediately after a visit from her husband, Robert Parsons. Many of those close to the situation believed that Parsons had a hand in her death. Very shortly after, Robert Parsons married his stepdaughter's teenage babysitter. Following his mother's death, Parsons briefly attended Harvard University and then launched his music career with the formation of the International Submarine Band, which quickly found its way to, where else? Laurel Canyon. Graham's death in 1973 at the age of 26 left his younger sister Avis as the sole surviving member of the family. She was killed in 1993, reportedly in a boating accident at the age of 40. Next, Mama Cass Elliott. Fans of Scooby-Doo. If you don't know her from nowhere else, you might remember the episode when Mama Cass was on there. So, I say that to say, that's big star status. I remember my uncle and aunt, who, my uncle's favorite dude was James Brown, but they had Mama Cass records. She crossed over. I do believe that my mama had her records also, and when I say crossover, I mean the reverse crossover. when you start to get on urban quote-unquote radio, what they just called back then flat out black radio. So here's Cass Elliot, Ellen Naomi Cohen, known professionally as Cass Elliot or Mama Cass, was an American singer and actress. She was a member of the singing group the Mamas and the Papas. Remember we talked about Papa John in the last live stream. After the group broke up, she released 5 solo albums. So there's Mama Cass. Some people also who just know about different strange little so-called facts or urban legends may have heard that she died choking on a ham sandwich, which just sounds, to me, that sounds like satanic propaganda, witch propaganda, hate from the other witches for whatever reason. Okay. Mama Cass Elliot, the Earth Mother of Laurel Canyon, whose circle of friends included musicians, Freemasons, young Hollywood stars, the wealthy son of a State Department official, singer-songwriters, assorted drug dealers, and some particularly unsavory characters the LAPD once described as some kind of hit squad, quote-unquote. Mama Cass died in the London home of Harry Nixon on July 29th, 1974. Of Harry Nilsson on July 29th, 1974. Now, Nilsson had been a frequent drinking buddy of John Lennon in Laurel Canyon and on the Sunset Strip. At age 32, Cass had lived a long and productive life by Laurel Canyon standards. 4 years later, in the very same room of the very same London flat, still owned by Harry Nilsson, Keith Moon of The Who also died at age 32 on September 7th, 1978, and that was a big deal also in the rock world. So 2 big deals died in the same house. I never knew that Keith Moon of The Who died there. Keith Moon, and he was the drummer, big band, The Who. Anybody that knows the legends of rock has heard of The Who. Okay. Though initial press reports held that Cass had choked to death on a ham sandwich, and of course the press is also part of this witchcraft elite, or rather the controlling members of the press. They could have simply been told by other members of the coven, hey, this is what we need for you to do. But though initial press reports held that Mama Cass had choked to death on a ham sandwich, the official verdict was heart failure. Her actual cause of death could likely be filed under knowing where too many of the bodies were buried. Keith Moon reportedly died from a massive overdose of a drug used to treat alcohol withdrawal. Okay. And the hits just keep on coming. Amy Gossage, Graham Nash's girlfriend, was murdered in her San Francisco home on February 13th, 1975, just 20 years old at the time. She had been stabbed nearly 50 times and was bludgeoned beyond recognition. Amy's father, a famed advertising PR executive, had died of leukemia in 1969. Not long after, her half-sister had been killed in a car crash. In May of 1974, her mother, the daughter of a wealthy banking family, died as well, reportedly of cirrhosis of the liver. That left just Amy, age 19, and her brother, Eben, age 20, both of whom reportedly had serious drug dependencies. Amy's brutal murder, cleverly enough, was pinned on her brother Eben. Police had conveniently found blood-stained clothes along with a hammer and scissors sitting on the porch of Eben's apartment, looking very much as though it had been planted. A friend of Eben's would later remark, perhaps quite tellingly, "If Eben did kill her, I'm convinced he doesn't know he did it." Next, Tim Buckley, a singer, songwriter signed to Frank Zappa's record label and managed by Herb Cohen, another Cohen, died of a reported overdose on June 29, 1975. Now, Buckley had once appeared on an episode of The Monkees, and like Monkey Peter Tork and so many others in this story, he hailed from Washington, D.C. He was the son of a mentally unbalanced and occasionally violent World War II hero. Buckley was just 28 at the time of his death, which reportedly shocked many of his friends and relatives. Despite having released 9 albums during his short life, Buckley died in debt, which probably had nothing to do with his management by Cohen. McGowan's words, not mine. His son, Jeff Buckley, also an accomplished musician, managed to remain on this planet 2 years longer than his dad did. He was 30 when he died in a bizarre drowning incident on May 29, 1997. Well, there's also Phyllis Major Brown, wife of singer-songwriter Jackson Brown, reportedly overdosed on barbiturates on March 25th, 1976. Her death was, you should all know the words to this song by now, ruled a suicide. She was just 30 years old. There are a few other curious deaths we could add here as well, though. They were more indirectly related to the Laurel Canyon scene. Nevertheless, they deserve an honorable mention, such as the death of Bobby Fuller, singer, songwriter, guitarist for the Bobby Fuller 4. He was found dead in his car near Grauman's Chinese Theater on July 18, 1966, after being lured away from his home by a mysterious 2 to 3 a.m. phone call of unknown origin. Fuller is best known for penning the hit song "I Fought the Law" and "The Law Won," which had just hit the charts when he supposedly committed suicide at the age of 23. There were multiple cuts and bruises on his face, chest, and shoulders, dried blood around his mouth, and a hairline fracture to his right hand. He had been thoroughly doused with gasoline, including in his mouth and throat. The inside of the car was doused as well, and an open book of matches lay on the seat. It was perfectly obvious that Fuller's killer, or killers, had planned to torch the car, destroying all evidence, but likely got scared away. The LAPD nevertheless ruled Fuller's death a suicide, despite the coroner's conclusion that the gas had been poured after Bobby's death. Police later decided that it wasn't a suicide after all, but rather an accident. Fraternal order of police. They didn't bother to explain how Fuller had accidentally doused himself with gasoline after accidentally killing himself. At the time of his death, one of Fuller's closest confidants was a prostitute named Melody, who worked at PJ's nightclub where Bobby frequently played. The club was co-owned by Eddie Nash. Many years later, by Eddie Nash, Old Nash, who would many years later orchestrate the Wonderland Massacre. Old Nash. A few years after Bobby's death, his brother and bass player Randy Fuller teamed up with drummer Dewey Martin, formerly of Buffalo Springfield. We have Gary Hinman, a musician, music teacher, and part-time chemist. He was brutally murdered in his Topanga Canyon home on July 27, 1969. Convicted of his murder was Masonite Bobby Beausoleil, good son, who had played rhythm guitar in a Laurel Canyon band known as the Grassroots, which later achieved a fair amount of fame under the name Love. Then there's Janis Joplin, vocalist extraordinaire. She was found dead of a heroin overdose on October 4th, 1970, at the Landmark Hotel. And you should know Janis Joplin as well. She also kind of, she had that crossover thing too. A lot of people thought she had a very strong and soulful voice. And she was being pushed to the highest heights. She was kind of the female president of the movement. Janis Lynn Joplin was an American singer and songwriter. She was one of the most successful and widely known female rock stars of her era. She was noted for her powerful mezzo-soprano vocals and electric stage presence. And longtime viewers of the channel, the name Janis is jumping out at you, I'm sure. Whether that was her given name or not, it's very important to the elite, and when it comes to this mind control programming, to evoke Janis. Because Janis, the double-headed or two-faced, again, they would call them gods, Roman god or Greco-Roman god, was actually, like Gemini, a depiction of an embodiment, if you will, of mind control, of splitting the mind, of doublethink, of creating two separate entities inside of one body. And since many of the entertainers would undergo processes and rituals to attempt to bring out this alter ego, some say, or as others would put it, to insert a demon spirit guide or helper to help you with your music or your voice or whatever, it's important that they go through the MKUltra ritual abuse processes that create that mental split. And certainly to get to the top levels of rock and roll, which she had reached, it's likely that she also was a victim of those programs and that type of programming. Okay. Janis Joplin, vocalist extraordinaire, was found dead of a heroin overdose on October 4th, 1970, at the Landmark Hotel about a mile east of the mouth of Laurel Canyon, where she occasionally visited. Indications were that she had taken or been given a hot shot, many times stronger than standard street heroin. Joplin's father, by the way, was a petroleum engineer for Texaco, and though it might normally seem an odd coupling, it seems somehow perfectly natural in the context of this story that Janis once dated the great crusader in the war on all things immoral, William Bennett. Like Morrison, Hendrix, and Wilson, Joplin died at the age of 27. Then we have Duane Allman and Barry Oakley, lead guitarist and bass player for the Allman Brothers. They were killed in freakishly similar motorcycle crashes on October 29th, 1979, which is within the period of time that they celebrate Samhain, or what we call Halloween, and November 11th, 1972, which is a big deal for them because of the dual 11s, 11 is a numerical representation of the idea of Janus, of this duality, this alter ego, or this other spirit inside. Think Sasha Fierce and Beyonce, and so on and so forth. So, Duane Allman and Barry Oakley died in motorcycle crashes that were freakishly similar. Allman on October 29th, 1971, and Oakley on November 11th, 1972. Allman was the son of Willis Allman, a U.S. Army sergeant who had been murdered by another soldier near Norfolk, Virginia, home of the world's largest naval installation. And that happened on December 26th, 1949, which is within the time of the celebration of Saturnalia, another witches' holiday. In 1967, Duane and his younger brother Greg, then billing themselves as the Allman Joys, they ventured out to Los Angeles together. Well, while they were there, Greg auditioned for and was almost signed by the Laurel Canyon band Poco, which featured Buffalo Springfield alumni Richie Furay and Jim Messina, as well as future Eagle Randy Meisner of the Eagles. Duane was killed when a truck turned in front of his motorcycle at an intersection and inexplicably stopped. Just over a year later, Oakley had a similar run-in with a bus, just 3 blocks from where Allman had been killed. Following the crash, Barry had dusted himself off and declined medical attention, insisting that he was okay. 3 hours later, he was rushed to the hospital where he died. Both Oakley and Allman were just 24 years old. Gary Thayne, bassist for the band Uriah Heep, yet another group with a keen interest in magic and the occult, with album titles such as Demons and Wizards and Magician's Birthday. Gary Thayne was found dead on December 8th, 1975, 5 years to the day before Nilsson's sidekick John Lennon would be gunned down at the Dakota Apartments in New York City. And the Dakota Apartments and Rosemary's Baby have a direct correlation. Okay, let's continue. Thayne had once played with sometime Canyonite Jimi Hendrix, and his first live appearance with Uriah Heep was at the Whiskey A Go-Go on February 1st, 1972. His death was, alas, attributed to a drug overdose. This is yet another member of the 27 Club. Tommy Bolin, best known as a guitarist for the band Deep Purple, was also found dead of a reported drug overdose almost exactly 1 year later on December 4th, 1976. Though varying stories have surfaced concerning the circumstances of his death. Now, Bolin had previously played for the James Gang, in the position once filled by Joe Walsh, who by the time of Bolin's death had become a member of Laurel Canyon's most commercially successful band, the Eagles, Hotel California fame. Bolin died a couple years shy of making the 27 Club. Now, it wasn't only the musicians with ties to Laurel Canyon who died young and often under questionable and sometimes quite violent circumstances. The dark undercurrents pulsing through the canyons in the early 1970s that left such a trail of destruction extended well beyond the Hollywood Hills, as illustrated by the deaths of a handful of mostly forgotten figures in the rock community. Now, Phil King, an early frontman for Blue Oyster Cult, a band whose album art and song lyrics suggested a keen interest in the occult, He was shot 3 times in the back of the head in New York City on April 27, 1972, just 3 days shy of Walpurgisnacht. 3 months later, on July 24, 1972, Bobby Ramirez, the drummer for an early formation featuring frontman Edgar Winter, was beaten and stabbed to death in a Chicago bar. He was 23 years old. Rory Storm, the founder and frontman for the UK's Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, was found dead on September 28, 1972. Born Alan Caldwell on the autumnal equinox of 1939 in Liverpool, England, Storm had close ties to that other, far more famous band from Liverpool, the Beatles. The Hurricanes' original drummer was none other than Richie Starkey, who left the band to join John, Paul, and George, becoming Ringo Starr in the process. Wow. It is said that George Harrison, who dated Storm's younger sister, initially wanted to join the Hurricanes, but he had to settle for the Quarrymen when he was deemed too young. That same sister would later date a young Paul McCartney. Popular on the Liverpool-Hamburg club circuit, the Hurricanes at times shared the stage with the Beatles, both before and after Ringo Starr defected. Rory's band, though, which he initially wanted to name Dracula and the Werewolves, never caught fire the way the Beatles did, and by the late 1960s, early 1970s, Storm had to find work as a DJ. In Amsterdam, at the time of his father's death in 1972, Rory returned to Liverpool to be with his grieving mother. On September 28, 1972, just 1 week after Rory's 33rd birthday, both mother and son turned up dead in the family home. In a rather unlikely turn of events, it was claimed that both had independently committed suicide on the same day in different rooms of the same house. Storm reportedly had sleeping pills in his system, but not in sufficient concentrations to have caused his demise, leaving the actual cause of death something of a mystery. Then there's Ronald Pigpen McKernan, a founding member of the Grateful Dead from its early incarnations as the Zodiacs and the Warlocks. Well, McKernan died on March 8, 1973. A vocalist and multi-instrumentalist, McKernan had a short romantic relationship and a somewhat longer friendship with fellow Death List member Janis Joplin. Ronald Pigpen McKernan was found dead at his home, reportedly of a gastrointestinal hemorrhage. His death is primarily of interest because he was, like Joplin, 27 years old at the time, qualifying him for membership in the 27 Club, alongside charter members Joplin, Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, and Jim Morrison, and more recent Hall of Famers such as Kurt Cobain and Amy Winehouse. Then there's Graham Bond, who was widely considered to be a founding father of the 1960s British R&B boom. He was killed on May 5, 1974, when he was reportedly run over by a train at London's Finsbury Park station. His death, to no one's surprise, was ruled a suicide. Bond, who was adopted and believed himself to be the biological son of occultist spy Aleister Crowley, Bond had a deep fascination with the occult. Wow. He also reportedly struggled with what psychiatric community refers to as a manic-depressive disorder, with what the psychiatric community refers to as manic-depressive disorder, which was aggravated by chronic drug abuse. Bond was just 36 years old at the time of his death. And then, finally, there's Pete Ham, a singer, songwriter, guitarist, and the leader of the British band Badfinger, another outfit with close ties to those lads from Liverpool, Well, Pete Ham was found swinging from the end of a rope on April 23rd, 1975. Ham's band was first signed by the Beatles' own Apple label, and their first single, Come and Get It, was penned by Paul McCartney. And I'm sure that the Beatles named their label Apple for the same reason that the two Steves named theirs that, right? Understanding the occult symbolism of and the need to profess that, hey, I'm rolling with biting the apple, quote unquote. There was no apple mentioned in the book of Genesis, tale of Adam and Eve, but the idea is still the same, and it's symbolic of, hey, I'm going to get the knowledge from the God of this world. Bump the dumb stuff. That's what they mean. So it's interesting that the Beatles label, their own label, was Apple. I didn't know that. And their first single, Come and Get It, Ham's band's first single, Come and Get It, was penned by Paul McCartney. I'd like to read those lyrics. According to rock lore, McCartney recorded the song himself and then insisted that Ham's band play and record it exactly the same way. And well, that's how they do reference tracks. Sir Paul also personally auditioned all 4 members of Badfinger to decide who would provide the lead vocal on the single. Ham's greatest claim to fame, though, was being the co-writer of the often recorded Without You, a song that became a monster hit around the world when it was committed to vinyl in 1972 by John Lennon's Sunset Strip, Laurel Canyon sidekick, Harry Nilsson, the very same Harry Nilsson whose London flat served as the death scene for both Mama Cass and Keith Moon. The song received numerous awards. We need to read the lyrics to that one. And Ham and his band moved over to Warner Brothers. Moved over to Warner Brother Records with the expectation that Badfinger, is that the middle one? Or is that the horns? With the expectation that Badfinger was soon to become quite a sensation. It wasn't meant to be. Within a few years, Pete Ham was unemployed and turned up dead in his garage. Ham is yet another member of the 27 Club, though not by much. His death came just 3 days before his 28th birthday. His passing was barely reported on due in part to the fact that neither Warner Brothers nor the Beatles organization bothered to make an announcement or issue any public comment. Shh. Just 1 month later, his girlfriend gave birth to a daughter that Ham was never to know. 8.5 years later, on November 18th, 1983, Tom Evans, Ham's former bandmate and the co-writer of Without You, well, Tom Evans was also found swinging from the end of a rope. Stuff happens, it appears. That's the end of chapter 3. Now let's see what folks have to say here, and I do need to take a very short water break. I've been holding it for y'all. Okay. Very interesting stuff so far. Like we saw last time. Lots of connections. The Dakota. Rosemary's Baby. MKUltra and the killer of John Lennon and his alleged connection to MKUltra, which a lot of researchers point to his reading of The Catcher in the Rye, which, alongside Alice in Wonderland and Wizard of Oz, are books that are said to contain the code words that are used in MKUltra programming. You know, the programmers take their code words from those works and a few others that are often cited as well. Warner Brother. Ain't that right, Sister Roberta? So this is some interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Thank you to the super chat. I didn't get to see it. I wanted to see who had left it. And my apologies for not seeing you. I appreciate you all. I will be shouting all of y'all out. I just figured out how to do that. Oh, Rick Ward, Richie the Wrecker, and Homeward Bound. Thank you. Thank you guys. And again, I'll be right back. And then we'll continue on to the next chapter. Maybe we'll take a couple of questions before we do that, okay? So y'all get ready for that. All praise is due to the living and true. Misconstrued, I'm not your dude, I'm just your mister, my brother minister. Son, don't you maybe get sinister, keeping it simply scripture. Come here, child, let me draw you a picture. Mixture, flow, sound, and texture. Fixture from Motown, a lecture. Lyrically bonded together with a song that forever uplifts the creator. Now that's the endeavor, now that's being cleverly undertaken. While they making us sicker than Hannibal Lecter. But don't be mistaken, it's Jesus, they broke every fetter and tether. To God be the glory forever and ever. His kingdom will never be severed. When the Northwest meets the Midwest, it's Reg mine and unplug them together. My face may be salted and peppered, but lose my favor and flavor, oh never. You can count on my Father, he's faithful even when the hateful band together against me. Whatever weapon they form will fail. I know I'm blessed through sleet or hail. No matter the weather, better than USPS. I count on my God to prevail. That's what the deal. That's how I feel, for real, for real. The one thing I count on to be done is his will. The Alpha and Omega. There is no other greater. I count on my creator, just like a calculator. Calculator, when I call he comes for me. My Lord and Savior, I count on him to comfort me. Calculator, in any emergency. Calculator, I count on him to comfort me. He's like a calculator, the Alpha and Omega. My creator, nothing greater, cause I count on my Savior. Just like a calculator, the Alpha and Omega. My creator, there's nothing greater, I count on my Savior. Young Neff's on the line. Okay, all right. Now, and y'all do know that's all for operator, right? Operator, this is an emergency. They didn't use the talk box on operator. They used the vocoder. But let's go to a couple of quick questions and comments. That's why we use the vocoder. In case you want to know. Yeah, let me see what the folks are saying right quick. See what you're talking about. Okay. All glory. Mandatory. Okay, all right. Okay, so any questions about the material? Thank you, Pillow Puff 44. She says, welcome back. Scoville 87 says, yes, I remember that song. One of the stars, Midnight Star, Atlantic Star, one of them, I forgot. TMH said that was hard. Word to God. Right on, my brother. I appreciate you. Carmen Payne said, I just finished the prayer at the end of the Addams Family, and here you're live. Amen. Oh, okay. Yes, and I did post that, and please don't slaughter me for my subpar editing skills at the time I made that video. Look at the dates on some of these videos. Y'all forget, some of y'all is new, but I'm not. I'm old as Yoda. Ghetto Yoda. I've been around a long time. Okay? And I heard it all. And did most of it. Hey, Fanuvi. Young Deals. It will be available soon. Without a doubt. And no name calling in here. If you can't be wise and civilized, you can't be chosen or nothing. If you're going to represent, don't just talk about it, be about it. Okay. So again, any questions on this material? I don't know why anyone would think that I would just change the subject for them. Join our prayer request show after this one, and we'll have more of a free forum. And when I open up the flow for questions, then anything goes. But right now, we're on a particular subject. Thank you, Reality Check TV Chicago. I love Chi-Town. Shout out to my Aunt Ada and Uncle Donald out there. 4 hours away. Okay. I have McGowan's Program to Kill. I also have Chaos by Tom O'Neill. Are you familiar with that? I've been doing this for a long time. Yes, of course. And I have a wide variety of books on all of these types of subjects because I've been into them for 30 years or more now, including books like The ISIS Papers by Francis Cress Welsing and Stolen Legacy by George G.H. I forget his last name. But yeah, A Stolen Legacy from Babylon to Timbuktu. Oh, come on. I was through with it for you knew what to do with it. Okay, so no questions about tonight's material. Don't be fooled because I got this good, cool accent. I talk like my daddy. We from Detroit. Okay, are you ready? Ready, Teddy, are you ready? I said Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, put some respect on her name, ISIS Papers. I just said that. So, okay, y'all ready? Right on. Great minds think alike. Y'all ready for some more? Oh yeah, Solo on Ice. He changed his name to Kwame Mfume. No, well, pardon me, that's Eldridge Cleaver. Yeah, right, that's right. Okay, so yeah, anyway. But this book is by David McGowan, for those who tuned in late. And it is called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, Laurel Canyon Covert Ops and the Dark Heart of the Hippie Dream. Yeah, I'm born and raised in Detroit. Can't you tell? Fooled you because I read so well. See, that's what you get for stereotyping, folks. If I had that Carlton voice, none of you would be surprised. Okay, let's go back. Here we go. Number 4. I'm so glad I don't have the Carlton. Thank you, Big Ted, for your voice. I'm proud of my black accent. But I can turn it on and turn it off at will, my friend. 4. Related lives and relative deaths. Jim Morrison's quote opens up the chapter. No one here gets out alive. Before moving on from the Laurel Canyon death list, there are a few more celebrity deaths that demand a closer inspection. The first is a truly tragic tale of a rising star in Laurel Canyon who by the time of her death had been completely forgotten. Who could this be? Now, the second is the story of a man who had only tangential ties to Laurel Canyon, but whose life and death may provide one of the keys to understanding the canyon scene in and of itself. And the third is the story of a guy who had no real connections to Laurel Canyon, but whose life arc has been so illuminatingly bizarre that it merits inclusion here. Judy Lynn Seal was born in Studio City, California, not far from the northern entrance to Laurel Canyon on October 7th, 1944. Almost a quarter century later, she would be favorably compared to such other Laurel Canyon singer-songwriters as Joni Mitchell. Q-Tip say Joni Mitchell never lied. Yes, she did all the time. Judy Collins and Carole King. Big-time songwriters. When she died, though, on November 23rd, 1979, not a single obituary was published to note her passing. Let's look at Judy Lynn, because this is new to me. You guys' comments, y'all tore the comments up on the last broadcast. I'm telling you, you taught me so much. I didn't have much to say. I was just reading. So y'all do the same thing on this one. Judy Lynn Seal. Yeah, y'all was chopping it up in there. Oh, people older than me, when they're talking, I tend to be quiet and listen. That's how you learn something. So here's Judy Seal. Let's see what Wikipedia says about her. Was the label called Asylum back then? Was it called Asylum back then? Judith Lynn Seal was an American singer and songwriter, the first artist signed, yes it was, to David Geffen's Asylum label. And an asylum, if you don't know what that is, look up some words. The first artist signed to David Geffen's Asylum label, she released 2 labels on Asylum and partially completed a 3rd album before dying of a drug overdose in 1979. Jesus was a crossmaker. Oh, Lord. Anytime they got anything to say about Jesus, you know it's going to be some cap. Okay. Anytime these folk singers... Anyway, I digress. Okay, let's read about her. Let's read some more about what happened here. What happened to Sister Judy? So not a single obituary was published to note her passing. But she's got enough fans to have a internet presence. So that's odd. Judy's father, Milford Bud Seal, was reportedly a cameraman for Paramount Studios with numerous Hollywood connections. Now, when Judy was still quite young, however, Bud moved the family to Oakland and opened a bar known as Bud's Bar. He also operated a side business as an importer of rare animals, which required him to spend a considerable amount of time traveling in Central and South America. Wink. Such a business, it should be noted, would provide an ideal cover for covert intelligence work. In any event, Bud Seal was dead by 1952 when Judy was just 7 or 8 years old. Depending on who's telling the story, Bud died either from pneumonia or a heart attack. Following Bud's death, the family relocated back to Southern Cali, and Judy's older brother Dennis, though still in his teens, took over the family importing business. That career didn't last long, though, as Dennis soon turned up dead down in Central America, either from a liver infection or a car accident. The animal importing business, I guess, is a rather dangerous one. Following Bud's death, Judy's mother, Onetta, met and married Ken Muse, M-U-S-E. This is just too bizarre. Okay. Met and married Ken Muse, an Academy Award-winning animator for Hanna-Barbera. What did we just say? Janis Joplin was in the Hanna-Barbera cartoon, okay. Who was described by Judy as an abusive, violent alcoholic. They're all connected. So let's look here. That's crazy. Ken Muse. Nobody's last name is Muse. He made up his last name like Creflo Dollar did. Never in my life met a human being with the last name of Dollar. Okay, anyway, here we go. Okay. So Ken Muse claimed that Judy was an abusive, violent alcoholic. At 15, Judy fled her violent home life and lived with an older man with whom she pulled off a series of armed robberies in San Fernando Valley. Those activities landed her in reform school, which did little to curb her appetite for drugs, crime, and alcohol. She spent the next few years with a serious heroin addiction, which she financed by dealing drugs and turning tricks in some of LA's seedier neighborhoods. By 1963, Judy had cleaned herself up enough to enroll in junior college. In the early winter of 1965, however, Judy's mom, her last surviving family member, died either of cancer or of complications arising from her chronic alcoholism. Take your pick. The details of this story will likely remain forever elusive. Barely an adult, Judy was left all alone in the world, and thus began another downward spiral into drugs and crime, which culminated into her being arrested and possibly serving time on forgery and drug charges. So in the late 1960s, with her addictions apparently temporarily curbed, Syl joined the Laurel Canyon scene, where she attempted to forge a career as a singer-songwriter. Her first big break came when she sold the song Lady O to the Turtles, yet another Laurel Canyon band to hit it big in the mid-1960s, best known for the hit single Happy Together. The Turtles were led by lead vocalist-songwriter Howard Kaylan, who happened to be, small world that it is, a cousin of Frank Zappa's manager and business partner, Herb Cohen. The band released the song, which featured Judy's guitar work, in 1969. The next year, Judy Syl became the first artist signed to David Geffen's fledgling Asylum record label. Old folks would say an asylum was a crazy house. The year after that, her self-titled debut album became Asylum's first official release, and the first single from the album, Jesus Was a Crossmaker, was produced by Graham Nash of Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, whom she opened for on tour following the album's release. Though critically well received, the album's sales were disappointing, in part because the record was overshadowed by the debut albums of Jackson Browne and the Eagles. Both were released by Asylum shortly after the release of Judy's album. So Judy's second album, 1973's Heart Food, that's it gave me a chill. Which language? Think Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The hardest scene. When the thuggy pulls out the heart, didn't he eat it? Or am I tripping? But anyway, that's the imagery that comes into my mind, is heart food. Though I understand the poetic or the figurative idea is what they want you to get. That's songwriter's secret, Which Language 101. So Judy's second album, Heart Food, was even more of a commercial disappointment. Nevertheless, in 1974, she began working on a third album in the Monkees' Mike Nesmith's recording studio. Prior to completion, however, she abandoned the project and promptly disappeared without a trace. What became of her between that time and her death some 5 years later remains largely a mystery. It is assumed that she once again descended into a life of drugs and prostitution, but no one seems to know for sure. It is alleged that she was seriously injured when her car was rear-ended by actor Danny Kaye, causing her to suffer from chronic back pain thereafter, thus contributing to her drug addictions. According to a friend of hers, She lived in a home that featured an enormous photo of Bela Lugosi. Do you know who Bela Lugosi is? He was famous for playing monsters in the movies. So she was into the dark stuff. He played Dracula and other monsters. He wasn't as big as Boris Karloff. So, okay. Okay. According to a friend of hers, she lived in a home that featured an enormous photo of Bela Lugosi above the fireplace, a large ebony cross above her bed, and racks on racks on racks of candles. She is said to read extensively from Rosicrucian manuscripts, which is just it's a Christian. It's actually a branch of the Brotherhood, a Freemasonic offshoot, really connected to Catholicism. The Rosicrucian, the Rosi for rosy or red, and Crucian for cruci or crux or crux for cross. So she may have been a part of the Rosicrucian order. The Rosicrucians are a community of mystics who study and practice the metaphysical laws governing the universe. Founded in 1915 by H. Spencer Lewis. And again, deep researchers of the Brotherhood understand that this is one of the fraternities, one of the brotherhoods, the Fraternitas Rosae Crux, I believe is another way to say it. That's one of their organizations. So it's a fraternity and an ancient mystical order. And these are usually the places and spaces where we can find the type of stuff we talk about all the time. The secret workings of witches working together behind the scenes and assuming images and identities that remove from the public any inkling that the person is seriously a witch. They'll drop a little hint here and there and play with the idea or kind of lean into it when they see that the public is really going crazy with certain things. But whenever we really scratch the surface of something that they don't want discovered, they have themselves covered, and they can make you look crazy by calling them a witch simply because they belong to this or that. Okay. When it's true, the truth is stranger than fiction. So, she is said to have read extensively from Rosicrucian manuscripts and from the writings of Aleister Crowley. Oh, Judy. And she is said to have possessed a complete collection of the works of Helena Blavatsky, Queen of Witches. She's the Marcus Garvey Malcolm X of the witch community, of the female. No, she's the Coretta Scott King, Winnie Mandela. Blavatsky, we've talked about her many times. No, in all seriousness, she is key because Blavatsky is reportedly the psychic who was in attendance at the famous meeting where they said that they decided that they needed Hitler to be who Hitler became. So she is, like Crowley, one of the people that you'll often hear mentioned when we talk about the grand designers of these schemes. Crowley would be the most famous male of the witches, and Blavatsky the most famous female. And I've read their writings, and I'm a second generation reader of the writings. And so don't tell me what they say and what they don't say or what they don't mean. If you don't understand that these people were evil and that they understood and believed that Jesus was real and that the devil was too, and they simply chose the devil because they said that in this world that's the smart thing to do. Who cares about the next life or the afterlife? And the things that both of them described can be easily seen by any sane or rational or reasonable person as evil. Things that they suggested that you do. Again, some people get the base writings and they only read certain teachings, and then they turn around and read some Dr. York and they see the same thing and they say, oh no, no, really, they were just about the higher sciences. Just open up your mind, your third eye and your chakra, and then you'll truly be conscious. See, right now you still one of the deaf, dumb, and blind walking, my brother. That type of deal. But and of course there is the black version and the white version of the same demonic lie, of the same big red lie. And then, they tell the hippie types, or they tell the New Agers, well, no, Blavatsky and Crowley, they get a bad name. They get such a bad rap. See, that's because of this Judeo-Christian patriarchal society that we live in. What Blavatsky and Crowley really just advocated was just not being bound and tied by the ways of this world. They just really wanted you to free your mind. Same thing with Timothy Leary. I know your arguments, because I used to be a goofy goober too. But anyway, so Judy had been given, or she claimed to possess, a complete collection of the work of Helena Blavatsky, and Judy claimed, or friends, close associates claimed, that Judy was a gifted tarot card reader. What is known for sure is that on the day after Thanksgiving 1979, Judy Seal, the last surviving member of her family, was found dead in a North Hollywood apartment. The cause of death was listed as acute cocaine and codeine intoxication. It was claimed that a suicide note was found, but friends insisted that the supposed note was either a portion of a diary entry or an unfinished song. Really? One of her friends would later note that at some point in her life, Judy began to realize that there was a part of her that wasn't under her conscious control, quote, unquote. I'm guessing that the guy up for review next could relate to that. And who is next up for review? Somebody new to me, might be new to you, probably not new to you. So we got a lot of very, very well-informed listeners. And I'm loving your comments. School me. Because it's not my era of music. Okay, so here we go. Phil, and please forgive my pronunciation. I don't know how that's pronounced. I would imagine it's Oaks. But Phil O., a folk singer, songwriter, and political activist, was found hanged in his sister's home in Far Rockaway, New York, on April 9th, 1976. Okay. 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 Throughout his life, I want to say his name right. Pronounce O-C-H-S. Thank you. YouTube has everything. Go, go, go. Hello. Oops. I'm sorry.
Phil Ox.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Phil
sir.
Ox.
Thank you, sir. I heard you the first time. Okay, Phil Ox, and I'm sure somebody right now screaming in the chat that I can't see. It's Ox. It's pronounced Ox, like O-X. You lamux. Okay. Throughout his life, Ox was one of the most overtly political of the 1960s rock and folk music stars. A regular attendee at anti-war civil rights and labor rallies, Ox appeared to be at all times an unwavering political leftist. Of course. He named his first band the Singing Socialists. Well, it should be more obvious. That all changed, however, and rather dramatically in the months before his death. Born in El Paso, Texas, on December 19th, 1940, Phil and his family moved frequently during the first few years of his life. His father, Dr. Jacob Ox, had been drafted by the U.S. Army and assigned to various military hospitals in New York, New Mexico, and Texas. In 1943, Dr. Ox was shipped overseas, returning 2 years later with a medical discharge. Upon his return, he was immediately institutionalized and didn't return to his family for another 2 years. During that time, he was subjected to every psychiatric treatment imaginable, including electroshock therapy. When he finally returned to his family in 1947, he was but a shell of his former self, described by his sister as almost like a phantom. Beginning in the fall of 1956, Phil Ox began attending Staunton Military Academy, the very same institution that future serial killer cult leader Gary Heitnick would attend just 1 year after Ox graduated. During Phil's 2 years there, a friend and fellow band member was found swinging from the end of a rope. I probably don't need to add here that the death was ruled a suicide. Following graduation, Phil enrolled at Ohio State University, but not before, oddly enough, having a little plastic surgery done to alter his appearance. Doing such things, needless to say, was rather uncommon in 1958. In early 1962, just months after his scheduled graduation, Ox dropped out of college to pursue a career in music. By 1966, he had released 3 albums. In 1967, under the management of his brother Michael Ox, Phil moved out to Los Angeles. Michael had begun working the previous year as an assistant to Billy James, who maintained a party house at 8504 Rid Path in, you guessed it, Laurel Canyon. As the 1970s rolled around and with his career beginning to fade, Phil Ox began to travel internationally, usually accompanied by vast quantities of booze and pills. Those travels included a visit to Chile, not long before the U.S.-sponsored coup that toppled Salvador Allende. In the summer of 1975, Phil Ox's public persona abruptly changed. What? John Butler Train, Ox proclaimed himself a CIA operative and presented himself as a belligerent right-wing thug, the polar opposite of a socialist. This is hard. Let's see John Butler Train. So he did like, what was the name of that? Oh my God, he was a huge country music sensation, and he came out with a darker version of himself and recorded as that name. Oh, let it come to me. John Butler, this is crazy. John Butler Train. That's crazy. What? Adopting the name John Butler Train. And it's a song by Paul Kimmig also. Let me see. It's a song by Moviola. Oh, people make songs about John Butler Train. A tribute to Phil Ox. Interesting. John Train probably refers to the pseudonym of protest singer Phil Ox. He apparently suffered a decline in mental health. Of course they'd say that. Okay, let's see what Dave has to say. So he says, adopting the name John Butler Train, Ox proclaimed himself a CIA operative and presented himself as a belligerent right-wing thug. I'm a thug. He told an interviewer that on the first day of summer in 1975, Phil Ox was murdered in the Chelsea Hotel by John Train. This is what he told an interviewer, that he was murdered by his alter ego. For the good of societies, public and secret, he needed to be gotten rid of. That's hard. Whoa. Well, it's been so long since I read this book. And it's one thing when you really sit and soak up a work, and then it's another thing after you get way more information and then you read it again more slowly like I'm doing now with y'all. This is really something here. Okay. Phil Ox told an interviewer, on the first day of summer 1975, Phil Ox was murdered in the Chelsea Hotel by John Train. For the good of societies, public and secret, he needed to be gotten rid of. Quote, unquote. That symbolic assassination on the summer solstice, took place at the same hotel that Devon Wilson had flown out of a few years earlier. Wow. One of Ox's biographers would later write that Phil/John actually believed he was a member of the CIA. Also, in those final months of his life, Ox began compiling curious lists with entries that apparently reference U.S. biological warfare research. Quote, shellfish toxin, Fort Detrick, cobra venom, Chantilly racetrack, hollow silver dollars, New York Cornell Hospital. Notes he had written to himself. All things that need to be investigated for these clandestine activities that the witches and warlocks in charge, the powers that should not be, undertake and partake in. Many years before Ox's metamorphosis, in an interesting bit of foreshadowing, psychological warfare operative George Estabrooks explained in his book Hypnotism how U.S. intelligence agencies had been working to create the perfect spy. Here we go with the MKUltra, y'all. Hold on to your hats. We start with an excellent subject, working to create the perfect spy. We start with an excellent subject. We need a man or woman who is highly intelligent and physically tough. Then we start to develop a case of multiple personality through hypnotism. Whoa. In his normal waking state, which we will call personality A or PA, this individual will become a rabid communist. He will join the party, follow the party line, and make himself as objectionable as possible to the authorities. Full left-wing socialist mania. Note that he will be acting in good faith. He is a communist, or rather his personality A is a communist and will behave as such. Then we develop personality B, or PB. PB is not peanut butter and PA is not Puritan Avenue. The secondary personality, the unconscious personality if you wish, although this is somewhat of a contradiction in terms, this personality, or B, is rabidly American and anti-communist, right-wing. It has all the information possessed by personality A, the normal personality, whereas personality A does not have this advantage. So personality B has personality B's information within it and personality A's information within it. Personality A would represent you. Personality B would represent the spirit that they're attempting to insert into you via the the metropolis ritual. Remember how we talked about that? The metropolis ritual. Metropolis movie. Or the ritual that Bridget undergoes in the Metropolis movie is often cited and reused and recycled for Beyonce's promo campaigns, and it's been done for what's that girl with the car commercial now? Janelle Monáe's, somebody who music nobody listens to. Nobody has her music, but yet some people they keep pushing, and I believe that those are often people that they bring through these programs, and they spend a lot of time and effort working with these individuals to properly insert within them that which will cause for them to have this robotic response, and split them, like we talked about with Janis, into two parts. The part that you don't know what the inserted part knows, but the inserted part knows what it's been given as a mission to do, and it knows you and your thoughts too. Because again, it's melded to you. It's born from you in some respects to a degree. Because the demon spirit can't bind to a human being without having some doorway to enter into and the permission to enter in through said doorway. So that's one reason that the hypnotism and the drugs are involved, so that you can give these entities permission just by your very ignorance of them and your lack of belief in them. Let's continue. So she says, okay. So the personality that's secondly developed, or the personality B, has all the information possessed by personality A, the normal personality, whereas personality A does not have the same advantage. It does not have that same power or ability. So personality A don't know what's happening. This is why in like Born Identity and Long Kiss Goodnight, they don't know what's going on. Even the Matrix plays off of this. In the Matrix or out of the Matrix. You're one person in, you're a whole nother person out. The metaverse is also playing off of this same idea. But let's move forward. So this expert from the book Hypnotism says, my super spy plays his role as a communist in his waking state aggressively, consistently, fearlessly. But his PB, or his personality B, is a loyal American, and PB has all the memories of PA, of personality A. As a loyal American, he will not hesitate to divulge those memories. Esther Brooks never explained what would happen if the programming were to go haywire and personality B were to emerge and become the conscious personality, which is the goal. Because when this was taught to the royals of ancient Kemet first, the worst was first, like Farrakhan said. That's something he said was sure enough true. The fallen angels gave this technology, along with the technology of warfare and cosmetics and all sorts of things as listed in the lost books. They gave these things to mankind for self-destruction, to cause man to wreck himself through creation, recreational drug use. Recreation, what is that? Doing things that's not taking care of business. But yes, they gave man recreational things and taught him all of those different sports and whatnot. Oh, well, how was this sport developed? Complicated things like the agriculture and the ability to build huge temples and whatnot. These entities assisted man with all of these things. They taught man all of these things, including they taught the kings and queens specifically. This is not for the commoners. This is how kings and queens can control the commoners, their subjects, and how they can also keep the power in the family. This is what they were told at first. The fallen tells the high priest tells the king or the queen. They offer up their children. So yes, put my child in this process, just like the military man or the person that gets jammed up with the federal government somehow. They have to make that deal. And they make the deal sound sweet to you. Yes, we'll put your son in this program. Man, we're going to develop his leadership skills. Sometimes it's a flat out trade. Well, let me loose, and here you can have my child. Sometimes that's the case. But this technique was taught to them, was taught to the kings and queens primarily because it is a way for the entity to take over, just like McGowan just alluded to. Sasha Fierce will take over Beyonce. There will be no Beyonce. Sasha Fierce will devour her all up, for instance. If you continue to let this entity that they've allowed or that they've caused to enter thee to stay. It goes from being a walk-in to a stand-in. Goes from being a walk-in to a sit-in to a stand-in. And that thing is going to try to stay in. That's how they take over a vessel. So this is one reason why they're attempting to put this process, this metropolis, Project Janis, MKUltra, mind-splitting duality process. They want not just to have the entertainers and people that have a voice and a platform and some power or control or influence over what people think. They don't just want them in this. They want everybody under this control. So I'm glad that he posed that question here. So again, he said, Esther Brooks never explained what would happen if the programming were to go haywire, or, like I just explained, if the programming were to go as expected and personality B were to emerge and become the conscious personality. But my guess is that such a person would be considered a severe liability and would be treated accordingly. They might even find themselves swinging from the end of a rope. Phil Ox was 35 at the time of his death. Stacy Sutherland, the lead guitarist and founding member of the 13th Floor Elevators. Longtime listeners, I'm not going to do it now, but y'all help some of the people out. Proof revealed to the Detroit underground hip-hop community that they did a ritual on the 13th floor that did not exist in a building. And they prayed over the master tape, or rather the assignment was for them to join in prayer over their master tape for the Devil's Night album. So it's interesting that Stacy Sutherland was the lead guitarist and a founding member of the 13th Floor Elevators. The most striking thing about that story, as I've told it too many times on this channel to retell it now, is that there was no 13th floor on the keypad, but if you use the key, if you use the elevator key, you can stop the elevator in between floor 12 and 14, and there's a hidden secret floor where they get down and do their temple room magic over the master tape. And who God knows what else. So Stacy Sutherland was shot to death on August 24th, 1978. He was the founding member, the lead guitarist, and a founding member of the 13th Floor Elevators. Despite considerable critical acclaim, the Elevators had only lasted a few years. from late 1965 through early 1968. Sutherland was imprisoned in 1969 on drug charges and reportedly drank heavily after that. He was just 32 when he was shot and killed by his wife Bunny during a domestic dispute. The shooting, curiously enough, was determined to be accidental, which I suppose means that Bunny accidentally picked up the gun, accidentally disengaged the safety, accidentally pointed it at her husband, accidentally put her finger on the trigger, and then accidentally pulled that trigger. Even more interesting is the story of the band's frontman. During the group's brief period of existence, Sutherland was overshadowed by the enigmatic Rocky Erickson. Born Roger Kennard Erickson on July 15, 1947, Rocky was a musical prodigy who took up the piano at age 5 and the guitar at age 10. He was also, according to the 2005 documentary feature You're Gonna Miss Me, he was also a severely abused child. There are strong indications, according to the filmmakers, that his architect father, Roger, who rarely spoke to the family, sexually abused Rocky and his 4 younger brothers. Jeez. Though all but forgotten now, Erickson was a hugely influential figure in the mid to late 1960s. Before there was a San Francisco scene, Texan Rocky had coined the term psychedelic rock and was the first to use feedback and distortion. Now that's quite a credit as far as rock and roll goes. His distinctive vocals were a major influence on fellow Texan Janis Joplin, who considered joining the Elevators before being shuffled off to San Francisco and superstardom. Erickson was also considered to be very good looking and was an immensely charismatic figure who was well liked by all who met him, men and women alike. It's a dangerous thing in that business. Rocky began his music career at a young age after making the curious decision to drop out of high school just a few weeks shy of graduating. By December 1965, he had formed the Elevators with Sutherland and a psychology student by the name of Tommy Hall, who was not a musician, but who appears to have nevertheless been the driving force behind the concept of creating a psychedelic band. Hall was a very outspoken Leary-esque, as in Timothy Leary, Leary-esque advocate of hallucinogenic drugs like LSD and magic mushrooms. He later became a devout follower of Scientology. And the stuff like ayahuasca and mushrooms, LSD, salvia, anything that alters your perception of reality, those things are often it's a huge part of MKUltra programming because it helps to disorient the target, the victim. And it also helps to solidify whatever programming you're trying to insert because you're very suggestible when you're in those states of mind. Okay, the band's first album, The Psychedelic Sounds of the 13th Floor Elevators, was released in November 1966, 1166, Grateful Witches, Duality, when singer-songwriter Rocky was just 19. The band's sophomore effort, Easter Everywhere, yay, Ishtar loves it, was released. Easter Everywhere was released the following November. Just months later, though, the group's run would effectively end, though 2 more albums were subsequently released by the band's label. The Elevators' final performance was at a World's Fair in San Antonio, Texas, on, of all days, April 20th, 1968. It was there, it is said, that Rocky suffered a complete breakdown and began speaking gibberish. Demonic tongues, maybe? He was still just 20 years old. Erickson was diagnosed as being a paranoid schizophrenic and was forced to endure involuntary electroconvulsive therapy. While hospitalized, he began hearing voices telling him horrible things. A doctor treating him at the time claimed that Rocky would never recover and would be a vegetable for the rest of his life. After reportedly escaping with the help of a friend, Erickson headed to San Francisco, where he started doing heroin and other hard drugs, and soon developed hepatitis. Returning to Austin, Rocky was busted with a single marijuana joint. An attorney convinced him to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, a ridiculous defense given the charge, and Erickson was quickly hustled off to Austin State Hospital. He was still just 20 years old at the time of his arrest. Supposedly due to escape attempts, Rocky was transferred to Rusk State Hospital, a stark, barren, maximum security facility for the criminally insane. While there, asylum records, anyone? Insane asylum? While there, and of course I'm just bringing everything back in. It's not that he was on asylum records. I'm just drawing that connection. That's why it's called asylum records. While there, Erickson was subjected to more forced ECT treatments, electrotherapy, and the forced administration of Thorazine for 3.5 years. Wow. Also, while confined there, he put together a prison band known as the Missing Links. Well, one member of the band had killed 2 kids and raped and stabbed his own mother. Another had been involved in the rape and murder of a young boy in Houston. A third had killed his own parents and a sibling. And then there was Rocky, who had been in possession of an insignificant amount of marijuana. As 1972 came to a close, it was determined that Rocky's sanity had been restored, and he was released soon after. He was, however, just a shell of his former self. It's that reprogramming center. What George couldn't say, program, deprogram, reprogram, and Funkentelechy. In the mid-70s, Erickson formed a new band, Rocky Erickson and the Aliens, whose albums I Think of Demons, 1980, and The Evil One, revealed, which came out in 1981. These albums reveal obsessions. Are you serious? An album called this? I Think of Demons? And then follows that with The Evil One? Man. Wow. At about the same time, he told an interviewer that the devil, you see, he's my friend. Oh, Lord. He also told an interviewer that an alien had taken possession of his body, a belief that he still claimed to hold as recently as 2005. Now, real quick aside, because we're on our last page. Really quick. They would prefer that you present yourself as crazy, or that you would be taken or mistaken as crazy. They would prefer that you thought an alien had taken over your body and lost your mind than that you be able to verbalize what actually happened to you, what you've actually been through. That's one reason why the devil takes and degrades the minds of his victims to such a degree. Because if they could tell people what actually happened to them, there would be people who would believe. But as long as he can scramble their minds and their tongues and get them to talk and appear to be incoherent, even though they may have bright spots where sometimes they say something and you're like, man, I wonder what did they mean by that. I mean, that was kind of deep. You won't believe them because of all the other crazy stuff that they say or the other unbelievable things that they say and do. And that's part of why he destroys the mind of these people that he takes down through his rabbit hole. Okay. Wow, this is really a trip. Okay. During the 1980s, Erickson withdrew from the public view and continued his descent into madness. It is said that he developed a bizarre obsession with the U.S. mail, particularly junk mail solicitations, and that he indulged that obsession for years, poring for hours over his and other people's mail. That chapter of his life reached a peak when he was arrested on mail theft charges after it was discovered that he had taken mail from his neighbors and had it displayed in his home. He was, alas, once again institutionalized. Throughout the 1990s, Rocky appears to have continued to live a bizarre and troubled life. A reporter for Rolling Stone who attempted to interview him in 1995 described a heartbreaking scene. The formerly charismatic singer looked nothing like his younger self, with his teeth reduced to rotting stumps and his hair wild and matted. Multiple televisions, stereos, and police scanners blared at maximum volume throughout his home, creating a cacophony of noise apparently intended to drown out the ever-present voices in his head. Well, his fortunes began to change in the following decade after his younger brother Sumner was awarded legal custody of the troubled icon in 2001. In fact, it could be argued that Erickson deserves a special place of honor on this list in that he appears to have pulled off the unlikely feat of returning from the proverbial dead. Rolling Stone, after all, wrote an obituary for him and the band way back in December 1968. But more than 40 years later, in 2010, Erickson released an album of new material entitled True Love Cast Out All Evil. Thank you, Lord. I'd be interested in reading. Now, this is something you guys can guarantee. My interest is piqued to the highest. I will be looking into this character, this figure from history that I did not know, and I'm going to check out True Love Cast Out All Evil and them other two albums. I might not listen to them, but I will read the lyrics. I'm sure enough not going to listen to the evil one, and I think of demons. That disc was released naturally enough. True Love Cast Out All Evil. That disc was released naturally enough on April 20th. And in March of 2012, he completed his first ever tour of Australia and New Zealand. One final note on Erickson. In 1990, a tribute album containing covers of his songs by such artists as R.E.M. and ZZ Top was released. The title of that collection, ready? Where the Pyramid Meets the Eye, a tribute to Rocky Erickson, was an obvious reference to the Masonic symbol that graces the back of the U.S. dollar bill and that plays such a key role in various one world order conspiracy theories. The title was derived by a comment made by Erickson. And with that, I think we can move on now from Laurel Canyon's death list, at least temporarily. The list is not yet complete, mind you, since we have only covered the years 1966 to 1976. Rest assured, then, that we will continue to add names as we follow the various threads of this story. Lots of names, as it turns out. An inordinately long list. And that brings us to the end of chapter 4. When we come back to read some more, we will start with chapter 5, Desirable People, the Canyon's Peculiar Past. And if folks have any questions or comments on the material, now is the time. We'll take a few minutes for that, but not too long, because as I had stated at the top of this program, we're going to come out of here and we're going to go into prayer, praise, and worship mode in a brand new live stream. So you're going to have to cut out of here. You ain't got to go home, but you got to get out of here, because I'm going to cut it off. So let's see. Questions first, though. Let's see. Questions, comments. Questions, comments. Slick Firmament says, Unplugem, I have a book of his poetry. I can send it if you are interested. No, you don't have to send it. I can look for that if I would feel so moved to do so. But what I would look for, what do you guys think I'd be looking for? I'd be looking for tattletale signs, not telltale signs. Tattletale signs. I love when we catch them saying things. And obviously this man probably said more than he should have in a bunch of songs, more than he should have from their perspective, not from ours. That's why the devil has to let his tail show. It's got to hang out from his skirt a little taste. Otherwise it wouldn't be fair. He's thousands of years old. You wouldn't have no wins. So it makes the game halfway fair that he has to reveal unto you certain things to show, hey, it's me over here. And part of that is because as the accuser, he likes to be able to say to the most high, true and living God, see, I showed him it was me and he still chose me. One for me. That's what he gets off on. That's what he gets off on. Mimetic Park says, till what year does this book cover? Well, I don't know till what year exactly, but I do know that it's covering the years that the counterculture movement that was spearheaded by Laurel Canyon luminaries. It covers those years, the years that are relevant to that part of the conversation. So I'm sure don't go into the 80s, 90s. It's going to stop in the 70s, I'm sure. I don't know if there's a day or a year that's considered the official year of the flower child movement. Or pardon me. I know there's an official year that they say all got kicked off. An official year that it ended. I don't know of what year they would say that is. Perhaps 69 or 70. But so far, like he said, we covered into the 70s. So he said we've only covered the years 66 to 76 thus far. So yeah, he's not gonna get off subject, in other words. B Unique B says, not really a question, but sent you a related email. Okay, cool. Samson Wood says, what is the name of this book? It's in quotation parts in the title of the stream. Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. by David McGowan with a foreword by Nick Bryant. Laurel Canyon, covert ops in the dark heart of the hippie dream. Weird scenes inside the canyon. Colleague says, question, I heard you, and thank you for labeling that as question. That's my style. Okay, they say, question, I heard you mention Janelle Monáe. Why do they bring out people like her if she won't be popular or sell a lot, but she has all of the symbolism and attention? I don't remember what car company is that, y'all? I know y'all saw it. It's not a scrub car. I forget, but I was like, why her? I get Regina King. They put out a lot of artists who can create a cult-like fan base. A lot of the artists that they put out, such as her, and in my opinion, I might get some pushback from the chat tonight, but in my opinion, also Bruno Mars. They pushed Bruno Mars for years, and no one gave a care. It wasn't until they made Uptown Funk and they figured out, okay, see, just on the real side, they wanted black and urban radio to catch on with Bruno Mars, Janelle Monáe. They are the ministers and philosophers of the new age, and it's important that they have people who really believe those things, who really embody those things, people that they understand the teachings and the philosophies. It's more important that we keep you active in the business and that we keep you visible, that we keep you in front of people, that we keep people hearing what you have to say, than if people buy your albums. You're just like a high priest. You're as good as a high priest or high priestess. So although the records don't reflect that people like you, listen to your music, I'm telling you what I know. I remember thinking to myself, as a person who has had very close dealings with the music business for 30 years, I said to myself, how are they still signing him? I'm not going to say he can't sing or none of that. I just didn't like his music, didn't like his songs. Same thing with her. I don't know a single song by her. Now I know about 2 or 3 Bruno Mars songs. Not because I have chosen to listen to them. Not because I went and bought any Bruno Mars. Not because my friends or my cousins or my associates are playing Bruno Mars. But because the platforms that the powers that be own make sure that I hear Bruno Mars. They make sure that I hear Ariana Grande. They make sure that I hear Janelle Monáe. They have been groomed. They make sure that I'm going to see Lizzo shaking and gyrating and whatnot when she needs to put on some clothes. Okay, how big she is or how small she is, she needs to put on some clothes. But they keep certain people in your face because it's more important the ideology that they push. What ideology do the little girl from Nickelodeon push? The one who used to go with Pete Davidson. I just said her name. Ariana Grande. Who is she for? What's her demographic? Who does she speak to? So she is their programmer. Got to have her on the scene. Janelle Monáe speaks to a particular type of sister, a particular type of listener, a particular demographic. Got to have her on the scene. And in most of these cases, these are people who have some sort of sexual immorality or sexual fluidity thing going on, or where you couldn't see them objecting to it, at least. They carry the right philosophy. They have the right look and ideology for the future of the entertainment business, for the future of the music business. They're the future. So anyway, Then that's my opinion. Monet stole Bo Jackson haircut. Well, she need to give it back. No, Ariana Grande can hit high notes, and so can a million girls in a million different churches all around this world. But it's more about the fact that she was groomed, just like when a Disney star, like Britney Spears. It wasn't the talent. She got the push because she had been groomed by a corporation that already has a history of understanding the mind control. We understand how to program the entertainers so that they can properly program the people. So she's been programmed properly. So she will properly program young goofy girls around her age to give them the from the X to the next mentality, or thank you next, or whatever. The party, carefree, careless. Lizzo, carefree, careless. Oh no, Lizzo's just not ashamed of her body, and you shouldn't be. I'm not body shaming nobody. I need to lose about 25, 30 pounds. That's not the point. The point is she pushes a particular ideology, the philosophers and the ministers of the New Age. Don't care. Remember, do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Do Ariana push do as thou wilt? Do Bruno push do as thou wilt? Do Janelle Monáe push do as thou wilt? Do Lizzo push do as thou wilt? And eat as thou wilt and look as thou wilt too. I said it. Did Britney Spears push do as thou wilt? So anyway. So yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is very sad, Pillow Puff 44. Hey there, Lou Waller. What's going on in your part of the world? Gridiron Matrix. So they put two used to be popular together. They are called a power couple. Good example, Machine Gun Kelly and Megan Fox. Right. Right. Okay. So we're going to end the stream, I suppose. Ire Induque. I think that you had wanted to be a part of the prayer request. Part of the morning prayer or the fellowship group. I don't recall if I plugged you in or not, but I was trying to think of who I had forgotten, and I just could not remember. And when I saw your name just now, if that's you, please email me, brothermintheo@gmail.com, so we can get that straight. Okay? All right. So that'll be all for tonight. Oh, yes. B Unique B says, is that movie Janelle was in, Antebellum, about MKUltra? To a T. But B Unique B says, I haven't seen the movie, just saw the butterfly, which is another telltale sign that MKUltra is afoot. And yes, it is. First of all, it was entertaining. Would I recommend that movie? Yes. Check that movie out. It's entertaining. But was it about some old duality, mind control, double life, switcheroo type? Yes, it was. Hence the butterfly. Vanuvi is in the house. Dennis Bachman. He says, no, don't go yet. Well, I was just going to leave from this subject if y'all don't have nothing to build on concerning it. I built as I was reading. And anyone who don't like that I build while I was reading, that's what the fast forward button is for. Thanks, brother, says Jamarcus Trunk. Well, you're welcome, my brother. What movie was that? Antebellum, starring Janelle Monáe. It was interesting. I forgot how much I liked it until Sis just asked me about it. Yeah, I liked it, and let me also qualify this. When I say I like a movie, I could be saying one of two things. I try to make it clear. I can like something that's just entertaining. Napoleon Dynamite is entertaining to me. I don't learn anything from watching it. I can also like something because I learn from watching. I like Rosemary's Baby as a movie because I learn from watching it, or I pick up on stuff from watching it. So Antebellum was one of those rare cases where there was a little of each. Sometime you catch those. So do y'all want to get to prayer and praise? Sister Patricia says in all caps, you can fast forward on a live. What I really don't get the internet. No. You can't fast forward while we're live, but I'm talking mostly to the playback people. Do play this back. If I'm talking too much for your taste, just fast forward a little taste. Don't tell me about it. So anyway. 7th Ward Creole is in the house. D Nice 203 says, excellent show as always. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, my brother. Jaden Rogers says, peace and love from Port Huron, Michigan. I used to have my little high school girlfriend was from Port Huron. I'm from Detroit. DPS, kindergarten through 12. If you're from Detroit, you will say what hood did you come from, what school did you come from, and what hood you grew up in. It's a Detroit thing. If you're really from there, you're going to say it. You're going to say it. Between 6 Mile and 7 Mile. Bagley Elementary School. That's the same place that's on Big Sean's album cover. Mumford High School. Bobian Middle School. Hampton, then Bobian. All right. Yep. Y'all from Atlanta know what I'm talking about. Because y'all don't like for nobody to say they from Atlanta if they from Colley Park or Lithonia or Gwinnett County, anything that's not Atlanta public schools. Well, I feel you. I feels the same way. Anyway. Jalen Ryder said, my dad live in the D right now. Well, we'll keep him in prayer. Said G, the champion. Slick Firmament said G was the only hip hop head that stood against Bambaataa. I heard Melly Mel say to Vlad, I think, that everybody knew. Everybody knew he was a little fruitacious. Everybody knew Africa Bambaataa was sugar bloomers. Out there in the South Bronx, East Side, West Side, the best side. Babatunde Ajadele, SWS on Kenny Lattimore. Which song? Which song, Babatunde? Trick, Big Homie. That's your big homie, Patricia? You know Trick? Decatur. BK Saku says, is this live or just a rerun? We are live, my brother. Clayton County. But you know they do that to Detroit the same reason that they do that to Atlanta for y'all. They do that to Detroit because it ain't cool to say you from Warren. Like like folks is really from. Or to say you from Oak Park, like folks is really from. Because it's a vast difference. Once you cross 8 Mile Road, that's why he called the movie 8 Mile. Once you cross 8 Mile Road, if you're driving while black, you'll definitely know you're no longer in Detroit. In Detroit, you can drive around with no license, pole license, no fault, and your fault insurance. Nobody cares. It's too many more pressing crimes happening. But you cross 8 Mile. Don't let your taillight be a little dim. The only rappers that's really from Detroit is the new Ratchet rappers. I said it. Period. That y'all would know. Nobody that y'all know that claimed to be a rapper from Detroit is really from Detroit, except for the ratchet rappers, the young ratchet nephews, and I love them. I pray for them all the time. Yep. Pretty Ray, Sada Baby, all them. Not a single one. Not a single one. Nobody who name you would know. We don't have any. Period. And Detroit is like a foreign country to people on the other side of 8 Mile. They tell each other, don't go across 8 Mile. So that's why we don't like when you say you're from Detroit. No, you're from a place very different. Very different. But see, that's how you cheat and get street cred. Clout chasing. 4-2 Doug from Detroit. Y'all getting me. He's from Detroit. All right. Enough of that. So, are y'all ready for some praise and worship music, or do you have any good questions about tonight's content? Wasn't this a mind-blowing read? A mind-blowing read. Susie River Crossing said, this is over my head. We'll reach up. Stretch your arms out a little taste. My friend Dennis Bachman says, I'm from Russia. Das Vidanya? How do you greet in Russian? Again, we don't have any rappers from Detroit that the world knows about. We don't have any. He's from Warren. It's nothing like Detroit. Anyway. Well, BK Suku says, I'm in New York and missed the read. Well, thank goodness that you're going to be able to replay it in a matter of seconds. ICP, not from Detroit. Isham, technically, some of y'all might know him. He went nationwide. He's from New York. But he moved to Detroit when he was like 12 or something like that. He's more Detroit than the other guys. Royce, Oak Park High School. Again, if you don't want to say what school did you go to, what hood you grew up in, there's a reason. Because Negroes from Detroit love to tell you that off rip. I've been everywhere, man. All around, anywhere I go, if I wear some Detroit paraphernalia on my clothing, somebody from Detroit who spots me will find me and they will ask me, what street you stayed on? Or east side or west? That's the reality. Oh, my bad. Okay, all y'all know Big Sean? Big Sean grew up across the street from us. Big Sean went to the same elementary school I went to. Big Sean played with my baby sister, played basketball in their backyard with Big Sean. I guess they're the same age. And Big Sean wore braces as a child. And him and Jessica, my baby sister, going up for the rebound, and somehow his braces cut her eyebrow. She was bleeding everywhere. So my mama and I think it was his grandma had to, meet and everything was cool. They've been over there for years, just like my family been over there for years. Big Sean is from Detroit. Kid Rock, not from Detroit. Goodness gracious. Them people scared of Detroit. Paul Rosenberg, not from Detroit. They had a Def Jam. If you look up his bio, it'll say Detroit. He's not from Detroit. But anyway, what do I know? ICP, not from Detroit. Have y'all seen Detroit before? Some of y'all got family. How does that happen? The one thing I can say about I can tell you as a Detroiter, racism is an ugly and vile thing. And I can tell you that Detroit is very segregated and racially divided. Let me just say it that way. That's where they put us, and they didn't want to have nothing to do with it for a long time. Now, like I'm hearing about what's happening in Brooklyn and the Bronx and all over the nation, Atlanta too, so I've heard. Now they are gentrifying, or they're building up certain areas that I wouldn't get caught dead in. And they fixing them up now, and they're giving them a new name, just like that South Park, just like the South Park episode, right? They give it a new fancy name, Midtown, and they throw a Whole Foods down there. The police presence increases. Then they slap up some cookie cutter apartments that are too pricey for the people who are actually from that community to buy. And that's happening also. But that's called gentrification, children. But anyway, thank you for listening. All by design. Yep, easy being DJ Los. DJ Los, that's my homie. He was supposed to come on. Doggone it, I forgot again. I was supposed to call so we could do another interview for y'all. Los said he can't wait to come back on here. Yes, DJ Los, that's my main man. DJ Dez, that's my main man. DJ Dez, when Dilla went solo, they needed a DJ. That's DJ Dez. That's my brother. It's my main man, 50 grand. And I'd like to get him on sometime too. But anyway. Yep. Yes, Soda Sopa. Salsa, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yes, indeed. I laughed and just about cried when I saw that episode. It was brought to my attention. I laughed and then I cried. Old Detroit is done. The Detroit I grew up in is Pony Down Detroit, BMF movie Detroit. People used to die for wearing pony gym shoes. If you're not down with the Pony Down gang, you can't wear no pony gym shoes. If you're not down with the 7 Mile BKs, you better not have on no British Knights. Ah, the good old days. Those were the days. Yep. Well, when Dilla started doing his own thing and he could no longer be with the group, look on Slum Village last album, the one with Tainted on it. My man DJ Dez is the DJ. It's my dog. They from Detroit. Slum Village, they from Detroit. A lot of y'all don't know them. Dilla is really from the east side. They're really from Detroit. Slum Village. Elzai, really from Detroit. I knew Elzai very well also. As a matter of fact, ironically, it was through DJ Dez, I think, that I met Elzai. But we all used to be in the hip-hop shop. Detroit it's kind of country in that when you do something, you know everybody that do that too. And it wasn't like nowadays where everybody rapping. You could look at somebody and tell, oh man, he must rap. Because only certain people had that look. This Detroit, this dope man and killer stuff, pimping and playing stuff. So you walking around with some dreadlocks on and a backpack, you out of place. So all of us would go to the hip hop shop. It was like the little island of misfit toys. All of us misfits. I was a nerd that the nerds didn't accept because I looked too rough and didn't have the right clothes, and the bad kids liked me because they could tell I came from the same thing they did, and I tell them the answers, and I want to learn all the things the bad kids knew. And yeah. But yeah, we would all go up to the hip hop shop, and I remember Elzai might have been the youngest dude in there, and Elzai used to kill the freestyles and the writtens. And I remember I didn't have much hope for young MCs at the time. Now I'm 20 something. I'm 20 something years old in the hip hop shop, maybe 26, maybe 25. And I'm like, man, ain't no hope for the young rappers in Detroit. Don't nobody want to rap and learn the science and the skill and blah, blah, blah. And Elzhi was very advanced lyrically. And I remember I asked my man Dez, because Dez used to DJ at the hip hop shop after DJ Head stopped DJing there. So Dez knew everybody up there. So I was like, man, who was that young kid that was up there killing the lyrics? Like, oh yeah, that's my man LZ. That's what he used to call himself. LZ. And I was like, man, I want to talk to that young dude. I want to encourage him. I always had that type of role or image or whatever. And I remember me, Dez, and Elzhi on the phone waxing poetically about Kool G rap lyrics. My favorite Kool G rap lyrics was his favorite Kool G rap lyrics, and me and Elzhi immediately made a connection. Cool is Back by Kool G Rap. Okay, but anyway, Street Lords, I knew them dudes too. They was really about that. Street Lord Vaughn and all of those guys, they're not capping. They wasn't capping. But anyway, enough about rapping. Rapping. Yep. Yep, R.I.P. to Batin. Batin had said shortly before his death, he had told some of us, and when I say us, if I didn't know somebody well, I knew them by face and they knew me by face. We was all a part of this little tight-knit Detroit community. And he told a good friend of mine that he was really into the conjuring aspects. They belonged to this group in Detroit called the Order of Divine Reality. But I'm going into too much stuff. But yes, he went too deep into the occult. Batin did. But he was a cool dude and real native Detroiter. Okay. Yep. And now we got that ratchet rap. And the rap is fast because the Detroit activity of young people looking for something to do is go to the club. And the club don't play slow music. The club don't play Jay-Z, and the club play it's a techno city. The club plays songs like "It's time for the percolator. It's time for the percolator. It's time for the percolator." And it's these fast dances that we do, and I mean, everything is kind of getting universal now. But yeah, that was Detroit's thing. That's why these young boys rapping off them fast beats like that. Like that. Yep. But anyway, cheers from the land down under. You better run, you better take cover. Doom, doom. You ever had a Vegemite? Have you ever had a Vegemite sandwich, Tasmanian Damien? Yep, Detroit Motown. That's where I'm from. All right, y'all. So let's go ahead. Let's get on out of here. I bring it every day. Says, "Oh my goodness, the percolator." I bring it. Where are you from? Nobody supposed to know about the percolator. That's some Detroit ratchet stuff that we keep to ourselves. The percolator. When I was going to clubs, they was playing songs like that and beat that with a beat that with a beat that. And all the songs go like that. It's like it was a techno deal. Now you imagine slowing it down to play somebody's new rap song. Boy, they try to tear the club up. So that didn't happen. Lola Noble says, yes, mate. Yep. Baltimore. Somebody say Baltimore, they played that song too. Oh, y'all must be ratchet too. Y'all must be
for
ratchet.
the percolator. It's time for 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 the percolator.
All right, y'all. It's time for praise and worship. I got to get out of here. Yep, all of that. Watch out for the big girl. All of that type of stuff. Not like hey everybody, do the nasty dance. Disco Rick. One leg up, one leg up. That's Detroit club music, okay? Luke. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Yep. So that's just a bit about my ratchet roots and my uncanny ability to code switch. Oh, Lord. Yep. If y'all want to laugh, type in Detroit Jit and look at that dance. That's the dance that, like, if you could do that dance, you a real Detroit. If you can do that dance, the Jit, J-I-T. All right, y'all, I'm out of here. Hope you don't mind me having a little fun. Check y'all on the next one. Peace. Come right back. Whatever happened to Disco Rick? We should come up with the Struggle Rap Awards. Give him the first one for lifetime achievement. All right. Goodbye. I just had to say, my mama worked at the Northville Psychiatric Hospital for years. She worked there when I was born. What you know about it, Stephanie Fulkerson? Let me know. Let me know about it. Yep. Everybody come on back for praise and worship. Email me, please, brothermintheo at gmail.com. And let me know what you know about Northville. Please. 4-String Bandit says, thanks for the little Detroit hip-hop history language. Well, history lesson. Well, I hope you didn't mind it. Hope you didn't mind it. Yep. That and Poison Ivy. Poor. You throw that on when I was about 22, 23. Club go crazy. All right. Goodbye. Lord have mercy. The new stream is coming right up.